Welcome to Module 5 in Applied Research Methods in Sports and Kinesiology, KIN 5301. In this Module 5, we look at research design in sports management. First, we look at historical research, and then we look at legal research. The topics that we'll cover include the following: historical research topics as well as legal research topics. When looking at historical research, our objectives in this module include the following. We want to describe how sport management practitioners can apply the results of historical research. We want to discuss the essential tools and materials needed to commence a historical research project. We want to understand the importance and considerations of topic selection. We also want to compare the two major categories of source evidence, which include primary and secondary sources. Describe objectivity, reliability, and the factors involved in doing data analysis in historical research. And finally, we want to compare the two major categories of historical writings. Our biblical foundation for this module: for historical research, we look at Romans 8:28, which reads as follows: "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him and who have been called according to his purpose." With that biblical foundation in place, we look at historical research from an overview perspective. The purpose of historical research, according to McDowell 2002, is to make sense of a series of events in a specified time frame, establish their authenticity, understand the connection between them, and to interpret their wider significance. Within Chapter 11, we seek to help you to plan, organize, and complete your sports management history essay, your research paper, or project. We also seek to address issues including the importance and relevance of historical research in sport management and kinesiology, as well as the tools and materials needed to conduct such research, topic selection, and distinguishing and analyzing primary and secondary source materials. It also concludes with the discussion of the types and processes of historical writing in sport management. Chapter 11 also is based upon three influential reference publications: Anthony Brundge's 2002 Going to the Sources, A Guide to Historical Research and Writing, McDowell's 2002 study on the historical research, A Guide, and Martha Howell and Walter Prevenier's 2001 study From Reliable Sources, An Introduction to Historical Methods. So within these different studies, we'll delve into historical research. First, we look at historical research from an academic perspective. Sports management is often an applied discipline in academia, with a general tendency to push research inquiries in that direction. Sports management research often involves both basic or pure research. For example, the establishment of certain facts that lend their credence to the research. Managers and students alike should know about and be able to interpret historical developments in their field or even conduct their own historical research. This is true because sports history research, which for the most part focuses on the studying of human beings, their actions, connections, and consequences in the sport history, involve all aspects and sub-disciplines of sports management. Historical knowledge and research skills are key components of a well-rounded sports management and kinesiology education. With this in mind, students can then better understand the major issues and players in the historical development of the sport industry from the past, so that you as students can better understand the present as well as move into the future. And it's through this academic perspective that we proceed in historical research. Those who research, study, and read about historical aspects of sport management or kinesiology generally possess or develop certain qualities. They tend to have a sense of curiosity, inquiry, as well as adventure about the past, the present, and the future. Researchers want to find answers to the who, the what, the when, the where, the how, and why questions relate to their subject. Researchers should have or be able to obtain certain research tools and materials that are necessary in order to complete the task at hand. And typical materials used in historical research range from the basics, which include writing utensils, paper, highlighters, binders, dividers, note cards, as well as organizers, to the more involved. They get involved with photocopiers, microfilm, microfiche readers from the library, scanners, audio recorders, as well as the transcription machine. So these are the materials that are typically used in historical research because it does require you to look at past studies that may not be technologically advanced as today's digital items in our libraries. In today's current cyber age, another important research tool is the computer with internet access. Sports management historians, as well as those in kinesiology, can use computers to take and organize research notes, communicate via email with other historians and scholars, categorize files, store and retrieve text and data, as well as run statistical programs such as SPSS to analyze economic, census, and social data, as well as examine spreadsheets, i.e. Excel types, run research software and find information on stored CD-ROMs, as well as compile bibliographies, display graphics, and present historical data, as well as locate resources. Sports management researchers frequently search the conventional and the traditional outlets of academic journals, printed books, and hard copies of newspapers, as well as magazine publications. But as technology has evolved and it continues to evolve, the internet has become more and more widely used in historical investigations in sport. It has developed into a tremendous resource for source material and background information. So when it relates to topic selection in historical research, we pause and realize that in developing a sports management history paper, for example, or a kinesiology paper, the topic should be as follows. You want something that's intriguing, feasible, well-defined, contributing to the body of knowledge in the field, something that's manageable, and then ultimately a topic that you can research. If you're able to do these things, then you limit your chance of having to refine the topic. So always try to research in an area that is interesting to you. And so by doing this, the issue of refining a topic generally comes into play sometimes, but then oftentimes if it's in an area that you have an interest in, then the researcher will be able to research effectively. But some researchers select topics that are too broad. According to your textbook, if you have to refine your topic, it is not necessarily something you do at the start of your project, but rather you can refine your topic as you examine the available literature, determine what sources are accessible, limit the score of your inquiry, or clarify the objectives of your research project. Some source materials for historical research. The most common type is used in sports management history is written communication, and the type of source most often relied upon by sports management historians. Once you pick a topic, you want to use a variety of sources in your examination of that topic. Your sources of evidence can be grouped typically into two major categories. One being primary sources. As the slide explains, primary sources are raw materials, i.e. relics, remains, eyewitness testimony, or speeches that often contain the answers to questions such as what occurred, how and why it happened, what the context was, what caused it to happen, and who the principal players were. Some examples include unpublished manuscripts, published sources, or even oral evidence. An additional source is the secondary source. Secondary sources are historical works written after the fact by scholars as well as journalists. Most often, they are written documents that historians produce based upon their examination of primary sources. Some examples include books, scholarly articles, book reviews, theses, or dissertations, as well as even conference papers. So these source materials play a valuable part in historical research. But you not only do that, you also do a data analysis. So researchers do data analysis in the following manner. You have the pursuit of objectivity, which should be at the forefront of any sports management or kinesiology historical inquiry. Researchers in this field should also assemble, examine, and compare as many sources as possible. When analyzing the data, there are many considerations. As we look at these considerations, the next slide will list a few of these types as you examine the documentary evidence that you find. The publication's credibility, its accuracy, as well as its origin. The source's authorship, status, and genuineness. The motives and truthfulness of the author or interviewee. The personal or public nature of the document. The amount of time between the event and the writing or recollection of it. The author's involvement in or proximity to the historical event. The author's observational skills and perspectives, the sequence of events, whether or not the document makes sense, the purpose of the source material, gaps in the record, and consistency of the record with other accounts. And you could even look at the social and cultural climate of that particular time. So the data is analyzed on various levels. In addition, in historical research, to not only researching skills and having an investigative acumen, researchers need to develop strong writing skills in order to publish and present the work effectively. Historical sport management studies and findings are usually disseminated in the forms of books, articles, or even conference presentations. The two most major categories are the historiographic essay as well as the research paper. Historiographic essays tend to provide the foundation for a research paper by examining secondary sources as well as preparing the historian to examine the primary sources. Researchers can direct historical inquiry and develop research questions effectively only when they know what has already been analyzed and interpreted, as well as what methodology and sources have been used. Additionally, research papers, kind of like the one that you're working on in KINE 5301, uses both the primary and secondary source evidence. It involves the application of historical methodology. The quality of your paper will be determined by the type, the amount, the reliability of the primary source material that you're able to find and examine. A thorough review of this section through reading, rereading, and highlighting are always important as it relates to your overall success in this KINE 5301 course, as well as those moving forward. Now we want to shift from historical research to legal research. The objectives that we look at in this context are to identify research topics in sport management or kinesiology that can be studied using legal research methods. We discuss the characteristics that make legal research similar or different from other types of traditional research methods. We want to understand how legal research methods can complement qualitative and quantitative methods in sport management research. We want to examine how to design a research project using legal research methods, understand the value and benefits of the nonlinear research design, and the recursive approach to conducting legal research, and also to explain how to write a manuscript, a thesis, or dissertation methods using legal research methods. As we did with our historical research, we also have a biblical foundation for our legal research. And this can be found in Matthew 28 and 19. And it simply focuses on the Great Commission. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Ghost. And it's within the context of this biblical foundation that we look into legal research. Some qualities of legal research include the following. Legal research can take the form of action, research with the goal of problem solving or improving industry practices. Qualitative researchers draw conclusions based upon observed behavior or even events. Legal researchers draw conclusions based upon a statement of the law and extrapolates how a particular set of facts fits within the confines of the existing law. Also, from a quantitative perspective, quantitative researchers identify certain variables and measure relationships that provide predictive or causal explanation for a theory or a problem. These methods alone rarely produce meaningful understanding of legal issues or outcomes. The nature of the law and legal research, kind of similar to the Great Commission talked about in Matthew 28 and 19, we look at the fundamental precepts of the law that are based upon predictability and consistency in the law itself. Yet the law is by nature organic, which means that it is a derivative and in some sense alive and well. The organic nature of the law shows researchers that the law can and frequently does change, either slowly based upon changing economic, cultural, political, and societal influences, or suddenly due to legislative intervention. Some legal research techniques to keep in mind. Legal research tends to be nonlinear, as the researcher must employ a combination of certain techniques and investigate a variety of sources to ensure that the research is comprehensive. Two techniques are necessary when presenting arguments in interpretation of legal authority. These include the first technique, which is the analogy. Researchers must be able to analogize how a given case relates to the current issue or problem. The second technique is to distinguish one case from another by distinguishing precedent. Certain sources of legal information can be found through primary legal sources, which include constitutions, statutes, rules and regulations, and court decisions. Some examples include case law, constitutions, statutes, regulations, and legislative history. Additionally, we see secondary legal sources. These are the backbone of legal research for sports managers because they give the research a more in-depth understanding of the legal issues being analyzed. Some examples include legal dictionaries, lawyer directories, annotated law reports, legal encyclopedias, treatises, textbooks, casebooks, and horn books, Shepherd citations, legal indexes, law review articles, academic legal journals, business or academic journals, as well as business magazines and newspapers. So again, just as we did in historical research with primary and secondary sources, the same applies in legal research. Some additional sources of legal information include the electronic search engine, which is found through our library, online library as well, electronic databases, legal blogs, as well as internet searches. Legal research also looks at a design and implementation phase. The phases represent a good approach to designing and conducting legal research in sport management or kinesiology. You first want to identify the research question. You want to identify current issues or developments of that question, identify legal issues regarding the question, as well as write an effective research question. You also want to organize the research plan through what is known as the IRAC method. That's the IRAC method, where you have a statement of the facts by identifying the relevant facts involved in the case. The I of IRAC stands for issue, the R stands for rule, the A, analysis, and the C, conclusion. And so after doing this, you're able to write a paper where you would then include common legal manuscript and papers, the writing of the thesis, the writing of a legal dissertation, or even the writing of scholarly publications for faculty and practitioners. So, having covered history research and legal research in Module 5, what's next? Again, we ask that you complete the detailed readings that have been assigned, as well as answer the discussion questions, complete the writing assignment or assignments, as well as participate in the course through discussions as well as interaction with your peers. This concludes our Module 5.